haven't seen this, so I thought that I want to review it with you guys because I've seen it pop up on my algorithm. This is not something that you guys sent me. So make sure y'all hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. He talked about Trump's income tax plan causing a class war. Let's deep dive into it, y'all.
All the president, especially on the 18 important trading partners. We're doing bespoke deals, and he's going to be intimately involved in every one. 2 weeks ago, when we had the Japanese delegation come in, he started it in the Oval, and then we took them into the negotiating room. So he laid the groundwork.
Do you guys know what bespoke
means? It looks like
means?
the tariffs don't work crowd owes President.
Do you guys, before we get into this, do you want to know what bespoke means? You may have heard this when it comes to cars. You may have heard it when it comes to trucks, something like that. That's probably where I gain the most insight from. When I see somebody say, hey, we're doing a bespoke deal, right? That means they are doing something that is tailor-made, that is custom to each individual deal. Trump is saying that he wants a bespoke deal. Usually when you hear somebody say bespoke, hey, we're doing a one-of-one, we're doing a bespoke Rolls Royce, we're doing a bespoke Lamborghini, we're doing a bespoke Maybach. That means that that is specifically tailor-made and custom. When you go into the Rolls Royce dealership or you go into the Lamborghini dealership, usually you can go in, you can pick the stitching, you can pick the pattern, you can have a custom headliner to where the shooting stars come through, and there's only going to be one of one. It is going to be bespoke, custom. You go in there, you select it. It takes them 6 months to a year in order to build it. It is bespoke. It is custom made. The color, everything is just for you. You got enough money, you can have it custom to you. What Scott Besson is saying is that every country is going to have an individual deal with the United States of America. It's not going to be blanket across the board. And soon we should be announcing some of these deals. But every country's relationship with the United States of America is different. And so we need bespoke. And that's what he's talking about. All right.
Trump, a big apology. Tariff revenue just smashed records. $15.9 billion collected so far this month alone. The White House.
April ain't even over. Remember, we started in April 2nd. That's when he announced tariffs, largely for the majority of the companies that went in place on the 9th. We've already smashed records with how much the United States of America is taking in via tariffs, and the month isn't even over yet. Almost $16 billion in tariffs have already come into the United States of America.
The White House says it's close to a trade deal, but in the meantime, the money is starting to roll in. Hello, everyone. I'm Jackie DeAngelis. Joining me are my co-hosts Taylor Riggs, Dagan McDowell, Brian Brenberg, and with us for both hours today, O'Leary Ventures Chairman Kevin O'Leary. Great to have you, as always. And the president could be putting all that tariff money to work. He says Americans making under $200,000 a year could see their income taxes slashed or even wiped out. Imagine that. Washington politicians funding tax cuts without borrowing from China. And while doomsdayers scream about trade wars, companies like IBM are responding by announcing a $150 billion investment right here at home.
Nice.
We're talking about jobs, technology, manufacturing, all in America. And grocery chains like Albertsons are telling suppliers don't even think about jacking prices up. They're holding the line for consumers. Investors wait for progress on the big fish. That's China. Kevin, you say it is time to level the playing field. So I want to get your take.
Yeah, China's a different stack than all the other countries listed there because there's many issues beyond just tariffs. I've been saying consistently now for weeks, and I'm happy to see this is getting some traction. I'm not the only voice on this. IP theft, we got to deal with that.
Yep.
World Trade Organization's disputes, we have to start clearing the backlog there because many of them are U.S. disputes and they've never been answered. Access to their courts, got to deal with that. They have access to ours.
And this is why every deal has to be bespoke, because when you just talk about a tariff or a trade deficit with a country like a China, no, there's other issues that we have to deal with that we have to hammer out. Why do we have to partner with a company over in China so that they can steal our IP and steal our proprietary technology so that they can manufacture it better and then put us out of business and sell it cheaper back to us in the United States of America? No, these complaints, being able to sue Chinese companies or sue China because they have not been operating and doing things the right way with the World Trade Organization. That has largely been a backlog, right? All of these things and flooding other countries with drugs in order to, weaken their consumer, weaken their society so that they can continue to get a foothold in the world. is absolutely 100% egregious. Trading, their trade tactics is horrible, because what they'll do is they'll go in and bribe leadership of other countries, and then they'll bribe leadership so that they can then circumvent the process, promise them that they'll get rich by then building infrastructure inside of their country, because nothing is for free, but then it allows for them to sell their cheap products and flood their markets, which then kills the jobs in those countries. So when Trump came up and he gave y'all a general summary and he said, listen, the true calculation of what it's costing us to do business with these countries is X, and he showed you that board, and he showed y'all what he was dealing with China. He's telling you that we're at a disadvantage, even though we're the biggest consumers, so we need to do things differently. It has to be bespoke, because the things that we're dealing with this country is completely different than what we're dealing with Mexico. It's completely different than what we're dealing with Canada. It's completely different than what we're dealing with the EU. So every deal has to be custom. I need to be on every deal, because we need to understand that we're going to do things differently, not just general across the board, that allows for you to be able to circumvent and then also upend the United States of America's economy. We can't have our consumers, we can't have our taxpayers, we can't have our people being taken advantage of by your leadership that operates with no rules. This is why everything has to be bespoke. This is why everything has to be custom. This is why he had to bring everybody to the table. This is why he had to implement the tariffs.
That's really starting to look interesting.
Because you can't bring them to the table unless you start to impact pain on their finances and on their economy. The quickest way to get a person to the table is to start making things difficult for their money. All right?
We should be focusing on this issue around NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. There are hundreds of Chinese companies that are no longer compliant. And with the new sheriff in town, with Paul Atkins, he's a China hawk. He's going to go line item by line item through those listings. If they are breaching the rules of the exchanges by not being compliant with GAAP, delistorama, right off the exchange. And once you get delisted off a U.S. exchange, it's not so easy to go anywhere else in the world and say, hey, I broke the law in the U.S., please list me on the London exchange. They say, no thanks, no thanks. So they got to resolve these issues el pronto. Otherwise, they're going to lose billions of market cap just erased off the U.S. exchanges. And I'm good with all of it. Let's get to the table and start talking every one of these issues and the tariffs. This time, China, you don't get away with the IP theft.
Yeah. And this morning, Scott Bessent, Brian, talking about the potential for deals with different countries that have come to the table. We've got a full screen: Taiwan, Israel, Argentina, UK, EU, Japan, Vietnam, South Korea. The big one is India. We're going to probably start to hear some announcements pretty soon, it sounds like.
I would love to hear an announcement on India fast. I think that would send a huge shot across the bow for China, basically saying the U.S. wants to shift the center of gravity to India, away from China. That's why we're cutting a deal with them soon. Yep. But I like the sound
Which
of these other
basically
countries.
puts China at a disadvantage. Y'all remember when Tim Cook was actually bolstering relations over in India so that they could move some of their manufacturing over there before they start to manufacture over here in the United States of America, because they didn't want to be independent on China. Tim Cook is a really great CEO. He already seen the writing on the wall, and he's seen the potential for Trump winning another term, which would then allow for them to be able to take advantage of what's happening over in India. And so now that informs the negotiations with India if you want to continue to do business with the United States of America.
On the screen last week, at the end of the week, the Trump administration said, we've got a new kind of system for doing the tariff deals. Every week, we're going to bring in 6 countries for talks, then go to 6 the next week, then go to 6 a week after on kind of a rotating basis. I wish that would have been in place, like a month ago, but I love the fact that they've got a system. They're identifying the things that they want to work on. So right now, Kevin wants to ramp it up with China, and that's fine because Bessent said China's in a different bucket. I want to see progress, and I think they're making progress. And if India's the first one done, and South Korea's the second one done, and Japan's the third one done, I think that's very good news.
I'm challenged on what to ask you, Taylor, because there's a bunch of things I want to ask. But I heard you sort of commenting when Kevin was talking about the notion of delisting potentially Chinese companies here. We've always talked about access to this market as a privilege, one that doesn't belong to people who violate the rules in such a flagrant way.
I was joking because I just wrote one of my law school thesis, and I was thinking about you, Jackie, on Shein suing Temu here in the U.S. to take advantage of our Digital Markets Competition Authority under our copyright law. So again, you have two foreign Chinese companies here in the U.S. suing each other because they don't like the way the other one is doing copyright in the U.S. and the way the U.S. are buying consumers. So again, shows how integrated we all are and the way that they do have access to our laws and our technology. And Kevin, you talked about forced IP tech transfer and how if you want to go over to China, you were almost forced to do a joint venture with the government. If you're JP Morgan, you can't just go and open up a branch in China.
Yep.
You have to negotiate with the Chinese government. They have to be involved. That's the stuff that I think Americans, when we think about China, is different.
Most people don't have any clue of what happens over in other countries. They just go based off of what MSNBC and CNN is telling them. That's the truth. That is honest. And I've been telling y'all this for the longest.
People understand and can wrap their heads around when they just feel like they're playing a different game. We've talked about devaluing their currency, which is in a way not playing fair. I think my only concern, Jackie, is when we think about raising revenue from tariffs, this comes back to me where then we can't think of it as zero tariffs and full fair trade. I mean, I don't think China ever plays fair. So we can't just go to the world and say everyone do 0% tariffs because we've talked about those non-tariff barriers. But if that's the end goal, then you can't raise revenue from it because revenue from it means that we're keeping 20, 30%, whatever it is, tariffs. So I think I'm still trying to figure out what's the goal and where do we end up in all of this?
Yeah. I've said this before. I think I brought it up Friday. If you've read what President Trump has said in the past, and I'm not talking about that speech he gave in 2018 in Charleroi, Canada, he wants to keep a tariff in place on every nation with which we trade. And so he said, just to let's do the math on the numbers and put them in perspective. He made a comment about revenue from the tariffs with it coming in, income taxes for Americans who make under $200,000 a year will be substantially reduced, maybe even completely eliminated. He has said things like that in the past. So this is rough math. The cutoff for the top 10%, so the bottom 90% of taxpayers in this country, that is roughly $180,000. So let's use that as the cutoff point.
Did y'all know that? I didn't know that. The cutoff for the bottom 90% is $180,000. So more than 90% of most people, and I'm assuming that that's combined income, household income. I'm also assuming that in order to be in the top 10% of earners, you have to be making more than 100, and that's in the entire nation. You have to be making more than $181,000 a year. Did y'all know that?
Top 10% pay 72% of the taxes. So you've got to come up with at least 28% of the total individual income tax revenue as an offset through tariff revenue. If you're going to have the bottom 90% pay no income taxes, you just make the assumption we're not going to get a.
I don't think that we should do that. And let me tell you why. Because I don't think that people would appreciate it. Why do something for people that don't support you and don't hold you down? The ones that would benefit from it the most would be the ones that actually voted against you. I don't think we should do it.
Nickel from any of those taxpayers. We're talking about we're going to need annually $600 billion in revenue. So based on the math of, oh boy, we're making $16 billion in April in tariff revenue, that works out annualized to $192 billion per year. We as a nation will need more than 3 times that amount. If you need $600 billion in revenue, you're going to need an across-the-board tariff on every dollar of goods imported into the United States of 18%. So is that what the president is talking about?
Right.
Well, my understanding.
That is not sustainable. That will never happen.
But my understanding is that
18%?
he does envision having in place a tariff. And broadly speaking, from a an economic perspective, it encourages work if you tax consumption. And let's just say it, this is a consumption tax. It is a tax on things that we consume that are bought overseas. And it encourages work. And it encourages us to work to make things here in the U.S. But I didn't mean to
I'm
interrupt you.
concerned about what I would call class warfare. When you take a huge segment of society and say, you don't have to pay tax, we're going to put that burden on either tariffs or the rest of the population here. Very uncool, because all of a sudden, you're not contributing. You're not helping anybody out. You're not paying any tax whatsoever. I'd rather just see a flat tax of 19% or whatever it's got to be, and everybody pays it. It's not right. And tariffs, by the way, should be strategic. Not every country should we tariff. We may want to say to ourselves, China is the enemy, and they are. I don't care what anybody says. We need to spend billions defending the northern border of North America. That's actually Canada. We shouldn't tariff anything in Canada because they have all the stuff the Chinese have, the minerals, the precious metals, the resources, all that crap that we're buying from China. We don't need to if we cut a deal with Canada. Why would we tariff that? Potash. Why do we want to tariff potash? Saskatchewan has all the potash. So I say zero tariffs on the strategic. And if you're not playing ball with us like India, okay, whack them with tariffs. But now when I hear India, and I love your idea, you know why the Indian deal's best first? You get to sell a Ford 150 into the rural area of India that you've never been able to sell in 20 years. 110% tariffs. I love that deal. So I say let's get more strategic, because Bassett said the same thing. Let's look at everyone on a bespoke basis. I like that. Now we're starting to fine-tune this tariff stuff. And that's why the market's already gained back 50% of what it lost on April 3rd. Today, we're 50% back.
I still believe.
And if you bought it at a discount, then that means that you're 50% up. I think I'm about to go buy a new 911. I can't buy the new 911. I got the Navigator on order. But no, to get back to what it is that we're talking about, I do think that there will be a class war if you forced the top 10% to pay. The top 10%, the top 5% already pay the majority of the taxes for the United States of America. That's just a fact. But if they don't get a break along with it, I believe that across the board there should be a flat tax.